What would you do if you were going about your daily life only to have all sense of control ripped away by a creature of incomprehensibility, leaving you trying to no avail to try to understand why it's decided to make you a part of its game? Hello, I'm Cece, and welcome back to the Crucible of Character, where today we have 5 scary stories from Reddit, focusing on an otherworldly creature, something that has truly pulled each of these characters into something much bigger and much darker than themselves. If you enjoyed today's video and you'd like to see more, I do post daily, and I'd love for you to consider subscribing, as I'm trying to get to 100 subscribers by the end of the year, and I'd love to have your help to do so. And with that, sit back, relax, maybe go get a snack or two, and get ready, because piece by piece, your sanity, your peace, may just be stolen as well. Here's today's story. It is entitled, I responded to a 911 call from a man pretending to be a little girl, and it was uploaded to the r/creepy stories subreddit by Elliot Price. And it starts like this. Every cop sees something that they'll never forget, something that will stick with them for the rest of their life. What I'm about to describe to you is that story for me. This is the most disturbing thing I have ever witnessed. When I turned 21, I joined the police force in a remote town that I won't name. The department needed new officers, and I was a young father who needed money, so the timing was perfect. Because I was a rookie, they assigned me to the night shift. It ran from 6 at night till 6 in the morning. The guys at the station sometimes teased me about my hours, saying I always worked the crummiest shifts. I actually didn't mind them. I've always been a night owl. The guys even called me Nighthawk, and honestly I kinda liked that. Besides busting people for speeding and pulling over, the occasional drunk driver, I spent most nights sitting back, listening to podcasts. In a weird way, it was kind of relaxing. After a year in the department, something happened one night that changed everything. A severe thunderstorm rolled into town and caused a major power outage. Torrential downpour flooded most of the major roads. To be in the best position possible when accident reports came in, I parked my cruiser in a parking lot in the middle of town. At 2 a.m., our dispatcher, Claire, radioed in. She reported that someone who sounded like an adult male claimed to have been kidnapped. They told her they were held captive inside someone's home. Then, the call ended. When she redialed, the caller didn't answer. My cruiser had a built-in computer display that showed all the call details. Based on the address, I was about 10 minutes away, so I was probably the closest officer. I radioed in and told her I'd respond. I also requested backup. Another new officer named Chris chimed in and said he'd be on location in 5 minutes. Claire clicked on her radio, but hesitated for a few seconds over the static. Then, she said that the caller sounded like they were altering their voice in some way, possibly through digital means, to make themselves sound like a child. She used a specific phrase, like a young girl. She concluded that officers should proceed with extreme caution. All of us were pretty close at the station, so we felt nervous for one another during the high-risk case like this. I radioed back and said 10-4, then drove off to the scene. When I turned into the neighborhood, I saw that every single street lamp was out. The entire block had lost power. That meant we would have low visibility into the home we were investigating, which put us in great danger. I followed my GPS to the end of the street, where the house was, and saw that Chris had already beaten me. His cruiser was idling in front of the house. I pulled up next to him and rolled down my window. Chris commented on the home's poor condition. I glanced ahead, taking it in for myself. The grass was knee-high, overgrown bushes blocked out the windows. The roof was dented in several areas and had a ton of missing shingles. It looked completely abandoned. This sent off alarm bells in my head. You can gather a lot about someone's mental state by how they treat their living space. I told Chris I'd take the lead. We both stepped out of our cruisers into the pouring rain, opened our umbrellas, and followed a waterlogged path up to the door. Chris clicked on his flashlight. whenever a second officer like Chris is present during an investigation, their entire job is to protect the leading officer by monitoring the suspect's body language. If the suspect makes a move on the cop that's interrogating them, they neutralize the threat. Chris made the perfect backup because he was both observant and calm under pressure. This allowed me to focus solely on the suspect's story, and if I was hearing the truth. When we reached the door, I rang the bell. Then we stood there, listening for movement inside. Rain pounded against our backs. After a few seconds, footsteps shuffled up to the door. Then they paused. Whoever was on the other side stood completely still, just waiting. A strange feeling came over me that we were being watched. Slowly, my gaze drifted over to the peephole. As soon as I made eye contact, a distorted shape moved back, like whoever was watching us had pulled their head away. "If you're in there," I said, "we'd like to ask you a few questions. Open up, please." They froze again, as if they were thinking about what to do next. Then, the lock started turning. The door creaked open, but only by a foot. From the darkness, a man peeked out of the crack. He looked like he was in his early 30s. He was overweight, balding, and wore thick-brimmed glasses. I took a single look into his eyes and sensed that he was hiding something. I informed him that we'd received a call from his address of someone claiming to have been kidnapped. The man acted confused. He apologized and told us it must have been a pocket dial. I asked him if it was a pocket dial, then how could he explain the voice on the phone call? For a split second, the man averted his gaze, then said he didn't know anything about a voice. I asked him if there was anyone else in the house, and he said he lived alone. Then I told him that for safety reasons, we needed to have a look inside. "Not without a warrant," he said. These days, a warrant can be obtained in minutes. I went back to my cruiser, called dispatch, and requested communication with the on-call magistrate. 5 minutes later, Claire came back on the radio and told me the judge approved a telephonic warrant and emailed it. We were clear to enter. I showed the warrant to the man. He reluctantly pulled open the door, and I could see that his hands were visibly shaking. I clicked on my own flashlight and stepped inside. A putrid smell immediately hit me. I scanned around to find the source and saw a hallway straight ahead and a room directly to my right. I shined my light into the room and saw what looked like a living room. It was absolutely disgusting. Piles of clothes and stacks of dirty dishes were spread across the carpet. Cockroaches crawled all over them. A couch that looked like it was pulled off the side of the road sat in an angle, against the wall. This man obviously used this room as his living space. I'd seen these sorts of living conditions in drug cases before. When I turned to look back at the man, he shifted uncomfortably. I made a mental note to check for paraphernalia once I'd confirmed the house was safe. Then I'd step towards the hallway. My foot struck something. I looked down. In the beam of my flashlight, I saw a pink Barbie doll playhouse that I knew I'd seen before. I thought about it and realized I'd bought this exact set for my daughter last year for Christmas. I asked the man if he had kids. He said no, but explained to us that sometimes his nieces came over, so he kept a few toys around for them. Chris and I exchanged a look. No mother in their right mind would allow children into this environment. I told him that this was his last chance to tell me if anyone else was in the house. He assured me there wasn't. I started down the hallway, and the man followed, saying that nothing was down there. Chris yanked him back by his arm and ordered him to stay put. The hallway had an open room on either side and closed door at the end, which was probably the basement. I peeked inside the first bedroom, scanning from right to left. I saw more children's toys and even items like diapers scattered across the floor. In the corner, the dark shape of a person was hunched over. I drew my weapon only to realize that it was a doll, sagging its head down in a rocking chair. The shock of that visual made my heart pound. I leaned against the doorframe and studied my breathing. Chris asked me what I had seen. Before I could respond, I started studying the doll. It was the largest one I had ever seen, every bit as big as a person. And the man had dressed it in woman's clothing. On the bed beside it, ladies' blouses, jeans, and lingerie were folded into neat piles. Each pile was separated by color. Meanwhile, the rest of the house was a pigsty. What was happening in this room felt wrong on many different levels. "All clear," I told Chris. I moved further down the hall and glanced into the second bedroom. This one was empty. I reached the final door at the end of the hall when from behind me the man called and asked if I'd like to see the upstairs instead. I told him yes, but first I was going to see the basement. The man said again that there was nothing down there. I heard Chris tell the man to stay still, which meant he was probably trying to follow me down the hall. The closer I moved into this part of the house, the more agitated he became. I reached for the handle, twisted the knob, and pushed the door open. It squealed on its hinges. A set of wooden steps descended into a pitch-black room. I shined my light down. I could only see the area that surrounded the landing. It looked easily as messy as the upstairs. From deep inside the room, in an area I couldn't see, something rattled. I told Chris that I heard movement. The man responded, apologizing to me and Chris over and over. Even though it was the last thing I wanted to do, I had no choice. The man was lying to us. Someone was down there. I headed down the staircase. Each step creaked under my weight. The rattling noise from inside the room grew louder. Behind me, the man repeatedly begged us to stop looking around. I neared the landing and swept my flashlight across stacks of boxes. No one appeared in my line of sight. Across the room, there was another door. The noise was coming from there. I drew my weapon. I commanded whoever was inside to come out slowly with their hands up. Whoever was inside stopped moving. I shouted the same command a second time. The door remained shut. I crossed the room, sliding between boxes and old furniture that blocked the way. My sights were trained on the door. When I stood within several feet, I paused, listening. Whoever was inside also remained perfectly still. My anxiety ticked up with each second. So many things could go wrong in this situation. I moved to the side of the door frame in case they were armed and trying to fire through the door. I reached for the knob, grabbed on, and twisted. Then I swung the door open. I was still hidden to the side of the frame. If anything besides empty hands emerged, I would have had to use deadly force. After several antagonizing moments, nothing came. I said a quick prayer, then aimed my weapon right into the room. What I saw, I can't go into detail on, but basically this is what happened. A man in his mid-40s was being held captive in that basement. He was a father of 3 and a respected member of the community. Months after he went missing, everyone, including his family, assumed he was dead. After 2 years in captivity, he finally got the chance to escape. Earlier in the night, before we arrived, the homeowner brought the victim's dinner down and made the mistake of leaving his phone behind. The victim managed to activate Siri and call 911. When we arrived on scene, the victim had already been confined in a way that prevented him from calling upstairs or making any kind of substantial noise. Then, when I ordered him to come out, he froze in fear, not because he couldn't obey my command, but because he didn't want me to use lethal force, thinking that he was a threat. Once I opened the door and found him, we arrested the homeowner on the spot and took the victim to the hospital for immediate treatment. I feel incredibly lucky that no one was harmed, and that we could reunite this man with his family. But the most disturbing detail, which has haunted me every day since, is how my dispatcher described the voice of the man who made the call. Why was he speaking like a child? The only explanation that makes sense is that the man was forced to speak in that young tone of voice for so long that even when he called the station, that's the only way he could communicate. And if he was forced to do that, what else inside that house was he forced to do? The end. Wow, that was a chilling story. I did like it a lot. I think this cop was super smart for being so young, and I'd say probably inexperienced, not having a whole lot of experience in that small town. I think, if anything, I'd just say get more backup. I know that it's kind of popular, not in a good way, but it is a popular thing that streamers sometimes get swatted. And what that means is that someone will somehow acquire, illegally, the address of the streamer, and then call 911 and give them the address and say basically that they have a whole bunch of hostages. Now, for any amount of hostages, to my knowledge, a SWAT team will pull up and they will break the door down and they will search the whole house. That's what they do. That's why it's a, quote, funny thing, unquote, to do to streamers, because, oh look, the guy on the stream has a whole bunch of guys clearing out the house with full auto rifles. So, if that's what's possible, I don't think it would have been wrong or bad for these two to call in backup. I think a lot of times, especially in jobs that could be classified as maybe more masculine or manly in a way, it's especially easy to try to not look weak. And I think a lot of times that leads people to overexert themselves and overstretch themselves. I think that a lot of times in our lives, we tend to, especially if you're a man, not want to accept help. And now this isn't a problem that is exclusive to men, but I think a lot of men do have them because of, societal norms and other things like that. And there's nothing inherently wrong with it, but you do need to understand your limits. You do need to understand what you're capable of and what you're not capable of. So with all that being said, I think the big change that I would have made would have been have more backup. There's no problem with that, especially if you pull up and there's, a super, super sketchy house and you are just getting the absolute creeps about it. Or at least radioing in and saying, hey, look, we're at the house. It looks super sketchy. Keep an eye out for us. And so if we don't call back in 10 minutes, then maybe send some more help. And that way there's no way for him to have, 3 other guys or 5 other guys or 10 other guys in the house, and then you both get ambushed, and that's that. That way you can get more help quickly. So the lesson for today's video is, please, know your limits. Think about if you're overexerting yourself in your life, whether it be with work, school, even things you enjoy. And please, before you burn out, learn to ask for help. It's okay to ask how to ask for help. It's okay to be weak. It's okay to not be perfect. And with that, I'm Cece. Thank you all for tuning in. Today's story is entitled, I'm an ER nurse, and after last night, I have proof that evil exists. And it was posted to the r/no sleep subreddit by Excellent Bear 4753. And it starts like this. Last night, when this woman came into the ER of Riverside General, I didn't think it was anything out of the ordinary. People show up bloody and incoherent all the time. But this woman, Emma, was different. She was wearing a green military jacket, the lining slashed to ribbons as if she'd attacked it with a kitchen knife. She'd fractured 3 ribs and gouged her arms raw, but the dang thing was still on her, clinging like it had been sewn into her skin. I've been a nurse for 14 years. I've seen addicts rip out IVs and men twice my size foam at the mouth. But what Emma said shook me to my core. And for the first time in my life, I believed evil might exist. Blood bubbled from between her teeth, and in a gruff voice that didn't sound like it belonged to her, she said, James Perry wants to know if Kathy's okay. Tell me she's okay. I'm getting ahead of myself here. I haven't slept in over 24 hours, so you can understand. Roughly a year ago, I was working the graveyard shift. It was 3:15 in the morning, and the doors of the ER flew open. A family of 4 was rushed in, all of them with gunshot wounds. 2 of the 4 family members were already DOA. An old man in his late 70s and a woman in her 40s. The old man was from a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. He had shot his whole family. One of the family members was still conscious, a man named Perry. We were trying to stop the bleeding when he gripped my arm and whispered, Is Kathy okay? Tell me she's okay. Kathy was Perry's wife, and she was already gone. None of the family members lived. No one but me, Perry, and the other medical professionals in that room that morning knew that he had asked me that. and Perry died 30 seconds after I lied to him and told him she was going to make it. So when Emma asked me that same question, yeah, it chilled me to the bone. How could she have known? How did she even know my name? I haven't been able to shake it since. So, once we got Emma sedated and placed her in restraints, I went to the waiting room to let her boyfriend, Ryan, know that Emma was stable. All he asked me was, "Is the jacket off?" It was, and told him as much. We had put it in a hazardous waste bag, which is why it was so much weirder when I went back to her room and the jacket was on the chair next to her. Its sleeve brushed my arm as I stepped closer, sticky with dried blood. I couldn't imagine any of the hospital staff would put a bloodied jacket back in the room. It didn't make any sense. That's when I noticed Emma's eyes were open, like she was staring into my soul. "Tell me what happened to Kathy." Her voice gruff again. "How do you know about that?" I asked her. Her eyes closed, and she fell back asleep. I moved through the halls, asking anyone and everyone on staff who had put the jacket back in Emma's room, but no one seemed to know what I was talking about. It got to the point where I started getting strange looks. One of my colleagues asked if I was feeling okay. I wasn't. I'm still not. I went back to the room, and the jacket was gone. So then, I checked the storage room. The jacket, back in the hazardous waste bag. I have no clue how it got there. I was afraid I was losing it. I was told to go home and get some rest. I didn't want to. I needed to figure out what the heck was going on. But I was basically forced to leave. I went back home. I had a couple of drinks. I just need to relax. But I stayed up all night, with thoughts of Emma and Perry. I couldn't understand how they were connected. It was proof of an afterlife. I'd seen people die over and over, and now it felt like evidence that we didn't simply cease to exist. That maybe the people I loved, someone I'd lost, might not be gone forever. My mind infected, which is why I decided to go to the house where Perry and his family were murdered. The house had sat vacant since the murders, which made it easy to slip in through the back. I used the butt of a flashlight and a rag to smash a small pane in the black. Mistake. I used the butt of a flashlight and a rag to smash a small pane in the back door. When I first entered, I felt a shift. Even with the early morning light sneaking through the windows, it was dark. My chest got tight. I told myself it was because I knew what had happened in this home. I walked through the living room. The floorboards creaked every other step. I was climbing the stairs to the second level when I suddenly smelled something metallic. It made my stomach twist. It was the scent of blood filling my nostrils. Then Perry stumbled through the foyer below, bleeding profusely. In an instant he vanished, and then gunshots rang out. I sprinted up the stairs as quickly as I could, my hearing fuzzy. It felt like ice was rushing through my veins, and before I knew it, I had ducked inside a bedroom down the hallway. I'm not exactly sure how long I had been sitting in the darkened room when the closet door across from me slowly swung all the way open. It came to a stop when it bumped gently up against the wall. I could only see children's clothes hanging inside. A soft voice from inside the closet said, "Hey, come here." Then, a child's pale arm protruded out from between the hanging clothes and waved me towards the closet. There was no way I was going over there. The child whispered again, "We need to hide. Grandpa's acting weird." I was terrified both by what he said, but also the thought of moving towards the closet. I came to this house for answers, though. So I went over to the closet. I stepped right in front of it. I couldn't see past the clothes. They prevented me from seeing anything beyond them. I could either leave or wonder forever what I would find out. So I parted the hanging fabrics and crawled inside. I didn't see the boy. I looked behind me, to my left, to my right. "Hello?" I said quietly. He wasn't there. The hair stood up all over my body. I took out my phone and turned on the flashlight, and the boy appeared out of thin air, covering the light with his hand. "No," he hissed. There I sat, face to face with a ghost. "When is my mom coming back?" She said we could leave after dinner. His big eyes looking up at me. I realized he was scared. Do you know a woman named Hannah? I asked him. The look on his face shifted. His fear vanished, replaced by a strange recognition. You know who I'm talking about, don't you? He stayed silent. I could tell he knew something. She was my wife. I can't tell you how badly I wanted him to say something, and I think he was about to. Then we heard furious footsteps pounding up the stairs from below, and I snapped back to being scared. Shh, he cut me off with a harsh whisper. He backed himself further into the closet, hiding as best as he could. His bedroom door flung open and smacked into the wall. I could barely see out from behind the clothes, but I had a sliver of a vantage point and caught sight of someone walking in. Joshua? An old man's voice called out. I heard a rifle being cocked. I couldn't see him anymore, but I could hear his footsteps. It felt like forever, but must have only been a few seconds when he moved back into my line of sight. He turned slowly towards the closet. Joshua, are you in there? He walked over to us methodically. I could hear my heartbeat thumping like a freight train. I looked to the little boy, whose eyes were shut tight. I looked back out to the room, and the old man was settled right in front of the closet. Something fell to the ground. It was dentures. The old man said something, but it was mumbled. He reached down, and his hand was covered in blistered sores. He snatched up his dentures and popped them back into his mouth, because I could understand what he said next. Close your eyes. I looked over to the boy, and he was gone. When I turned back, the old man was standing right in front of me. The hanging clothes slid aside on their own, and the barrel of the rifle was leveled with my face. It was a split second, but I swear he was wearing the same green jacket Emma had tried to slash off herself. Then, just like that, he fired the gun. I saw the spark of the barrel and heard the crack of the chamber right before I closed my eyes tight. I felt something hot and sharp tear across my cheek. I was still screaming when I opened my eyes back up. The room was suddenly empty. The old man was gone. The silence was so complete it felt unreal. For a moment I thought maybe it hadn't happened. Then I felt it, a warm trickle sliding down my face. I touched my cheek. My fingertips came away red. Blood. My blood. This was proof. Proof that something beyond our world existed, and that jacket has something to do with it. I left, and I didn't drive home. I went back to the ER. I walked the halls to the storage room where I last saw the jacket, but it was gone. The bag it was in, empty. It must have moved, I thought. It must have gone back to Emma's room. I walked in, and she was asleep. My eyes scanned the room for the jacket. It wasn't anywhere to be seen. Emma's eyes snapped open. Where am I? She said. The look in her eyes was different. She looked around the room completely lost, innocent, and scared. Then, all the lights in the ER went out. It was suddenly pitch black. The noise of panic began to swell in the room from outside. Then, I smelled smoke. Cigar smoke. It was strong. So strong that I began coughing, choking on it. The red glow of a lit cigar appeared. Its embers shed just enough light for me to make out the face of the old man where Emma had just been. The lights came back on, and it was Emma again. The innocent look in her eyes gone. It was like she was looking into my soul. Ryan has it, she said in that gruff voice. Then she said, I can help you talk to Hannah again. I didn't even say anything. I couldn't. I was too tempted. I would have let her go. So here I am, sitting behind the steering wheel of my car in the ER parking lot. I don't know what to do next. Do I go inside and let Emma out? Should I go find Ryan? I don't know what to do. If you don't hear from me again, it means something awful has happened. And if that's the case, let the police know that James, the ER nurse from Riverside General, is probably dead. Or worse. The end. That story was really good. I think the mark of a good story is one that leaves you with a lot of questions. Not in a bad way, and not in a way in which you understand that there was a lot of plot holes, but in a way that kind of provokes you to think, what was the problem here? What could have happened? What could have been the more that was happening? Especially with these short stories, that's why I really do enjoy them. Because each one of them is almost like a self-contained world, and you only really get each of them for 3 or 5 pages. I think it's safe to assume that the old man in the story was probably a veteran because of the military-type jacket. Now, with that being said, if he was that old, grandpa age, then I'm going to take a wild guess and say he was probably in Vietnam. And with that being said, there's probably a pretty good chance that he had PTSD or some stuff unanswered or unresolved in himself because of it. Now, it would make sense to me that maybe because of this PTSD or maybe because of this anxiety, maybe he did a real good job of hiding it his whole life. But then maybe he got Alzheimer's or dementia or something that kind of altered his mental state. And so it wasn't so easy to hide that pain anymore, and he flipped out, in a sense. So I think that may be what has happened. But has he come back? Is he still trying to figure out what happened to his wife? What happened to his wife? What do y'all think happened to his wife? What do you think the protagonist should do here? I think if there was anything different that the protagonist could have done, it would be, 1, let crazy stuff rest. I think we see so many movies on TV where the protagonist has plot armor, to a sense, where they can go against an entire army, and it seems like they are still able to have their cool character arc and accomplish the point of the movie or the TV show or the book or the story. But I think we also need to take a step back and realize that in reality, we are very fragile, and there are very real evils out there, and there are very real things out there that could very easily kill us. So, what would I have done? Well, first off, I wouldn't have gone to the house. I wouldn't have smashed the back window. I would not have run up the stairs instead of back out the back door when I started hearing stuff. Now, another thing, if you were all the way past that and you couldn't change anything up until that point, let's say you're in the closet, there's a reason why in TV shows, if somebody is holding someone else hostage using a gun, it's very unintelligent to be very close to the hostage with the gun. If someone has a rifle barrel pointed right at your forehead, and they are close enough that it's just about touching you, I'm not saying you have a faster reaction time, but what I am saying is, if you have absolutely no other options, it's not a bad option to move out of the way and at the same time grab the barrel and push it the other way from the way that you've just moved your head. Now, if you have both of these arms on this barrel, now the protagonist is what I'm going to assume is an adult male. That means they're probably at least somewhat strong. Now, an adult female, probably somewhat strong as well, from an old man. So, grab the barrel, move it away from you, try and maybe pull it towards you a little bit, and then shove it back towards him to make him lose his balance, then run back out, down the stairs, and out the door. I wouldn't wait for the whole cutscene of getting grazed by a bullet on my cheek and all that. Now, if I saw that the old man had retaken possession of the girl in the hospital, that'd be awful, for sure. I would probably try and beg for forgiveness. I'd probably try and beg for forgiveness at every point in this story. One, I think the biggest change that I would have done is I wouldn't have lied to the old dude in the beginning. I wouldn't have said she's going to make it if she very clearly wasn't. Now, with that being said, there's other things you could have said to allude to, oh, okay, it's going to be okay, right? But you don't have to say, oh yeah, she's going to make it out alive, or something to the effect of that. You can comfort someone and not just lie to them. And I think if someone is a nurse for X amount of time, so long, like this protagonist, they hopefully would know that. Hopefully wouldn't just be lying to people. If for nothing else, then to just not have evil spirits latch onto you, right? So first change, don't lie. Second change, do not go to the house. Third change, grab the rifle. Don't wait for the cutscene. Fourth change, just ask for forgiveness. So I think the moral of the story here is, again, very similar to yesterday. Understand your limits. Understand that you are a human being with thoughts and feelings and emotions and desires and dreams. And in a very small, short instant, that could just be gone. We are really only here for a speck of time. And I think a lot of us have this desire to explore and do amazing things and be the main character. And that's great and all, but you also have to understand you have limitations. And sometimes if you push them too hard, or if you try and be the main character too much, you will realize that you do not have the same plot armor that you have seen so much in your life. You will realize that you are very fragile and very small in comparison to a lot of the evil and good works that are going on in the world. Another lesson that I would take away from this is don't lie. As much as you can throughout your life, don't lie. Religious or not, morality or not, don't lie. If for no other reason than a selfish reason. It will put you into holes that are so hard to fill up later. With all that being said, if you've made it this far in the video, I appreciate you so much. The story's title is, I'm a pilot. Last night, an unidentified object appeared on my radar, and it would cross miles of sky every time I blinked. And it was posted to the r/no sleep subreddit by Gamal Frank. And it starts like this. I'm a pilot, a first officer for a major commercial airline. My job is a series of complex, highly regulated routines designed to ensure one simple thing: that a 100-ton metal tube full of people gets from one point on the globe to another without falling out of the sky. It's a job built on checklists, on procedures, on the cold, hard, and verifiable data that feeds into the dozens of screens that make up a modern cockpit. I trust my instruments. Mistake. I trust my instruments. My life and the lives of my passengers depend on that trust. Last night, that trust was shattered, and now I'm sitting in a hotel room 1,000 miles from home, thinking about what I have witnessed. It was a routine red-eye flight, a 6-hour haul across the country. The kind of flight that pilots both love and hate. The skies are quiet, the passengers are asleep, but the deep, soul-crushing fatigue of flying through the dead of night is a constant, creeping enemy. We were at our cruising altitude of 37,000 feet, somewhere over the vast, dark, empty heart of the country. The autopilot was engaged. The plane, a steady, silent ship, sailing on an ocean of stars. The captain, a veteran with 20 years in the left seat, was quietly working on a crossword puzzle. I was doing my usual scan of the instruments, my eyes tracing the familiar, comforting glow of the displays. That's when I saw it, on my primary navigation display, the screen that shows our position, our route, and any other air traffic in the vicinity. A single new icon had appeared. It was a perfect, solid green diamond, the standard symbol for other aircraft. But it had no call sign, no altitude information, no speed data. It was just a diamond. And it was located about 10 miles directly behind us, on our exact flight path. Hey Cap, I said, keeping my voice casual, you seeing this traffic on your display? The captain didn't look up from his puzzle. Nope, screen's clean. Probably just a ghost. ATC hasn't called anything out. Ghosts, or phantom radar returns, aren't uncommon. A bit of atmospheric interference, a flock of birds, a software glitch. They can all create a temporary, false target. They usually flicker and then vanish, but this one wasn't flickering. It was solid, steady, and it was matching our speed of 500 knots perfectly. This one's not fading, I said, a little more insistently this time. It's been there for a solid minute. 10 miles, 6 o'clock, matching our speed. The captain finally sighed, put down his pen, and leaned over. He looked at his own, identical, navigation display. It was, as he'd said, completely clean. Then, he looked at mine. "There's nothing there, kid," he said, squinting at my screen. "Not a thing. Your display must be on the fritz. Run a diagnostic." I stared at my screen. The green diamond was as clear as day. I looked back at his. Empty. I looked back at mine. The diamond was still there. A cold, strange feeling, a prickling of deep, fundamental wrongness began to crawl up my spine. "I'm telling you, there's something on my screen," I said, my voice tight. He gave me a look, a mix of annoyance and paternal concern. "Look, I see your screen. It's blank. You're seeing things. You're tired. We've been flying for hours. It happens. Just run the diagnostic and get some coffee." He went back to his puzzle, a clear dismissal, but my eyes were glued to my screen. The diamond was still there, 10 miles back, a silent, impossible companion in the night sky. I ran the diagnostic. The system came back clean. No errors, no malfunctions. I kept watching it. For 10 solid minutes, it stayed in the exact same spot, maintaining a perfect 10-mile distance. A part of my brain was still trying to find a rational explanation. A unique, localized software bug affecting only my display. That had to be it. I finally broke my gaze. I had to make a routine radio call to the next air traffic control sector. I looked away from my screen for no more than 10 seconds. I keyed the mic, made the call, and then my eyes snapped back to the navigation display. The diamond was now 1 mile away. My breath hitched in my throat. I didn't just gasp. I think I made a small, choked, terrified sound. It had crossed 9 miles of empty space in the 10 seconds I wasn't looking. "Cap," I whispered, my voice a strangled croak. "What now?" he sighed, not looking up. "It's here," I said, my voice trembling. "The thing. It's 1 mile behind us." He finally looked up, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated annoyance. "For the last time, there is nothing." He stopped. He leaned over, looked at my screen, then at his own, then back at mine. His eyes went wide. The diamond, now much larger on the display, was there. He could see it now, too. "What the heck is that?" he breathed, his crossword forgotten. He grabbed the radio, his voice now sharp, professional. "Center, this is flight 1138. Do you show any traffic at our 6 o'clock? Approximately 1 mile? We have an unidentified target on our scope." The reply from the controller was calm, but I could hear the faint undertone of confusion. Negative, 1138. Our scopes are clear in your vicinity. You're the only thing we see for 50 miles in any direction." The captain and I just stared at each other, the same cold, terrifying realization dawning in both of our eyes. This thing, whatever it was visible only to us. And then I understood. With a clarity so sudden and so horrifying, it felt like a physical blow. I understood the rule. "It only moves when I'm not looking," I whispered. The captain stared at me. "What are you talking about?" "When I saw it before," I explained, my eyes now locked on the green diamond on my screen, not daring to look away. It was 10 miles back. I looked away to make a radio call, and when I looked back, it was here. It only moves when I'm not watching it. It was the most insane, childish, playground logic thing I had ever said. It was the rule from a horror movie, from a video game. Weeping angels, don't blink. But in the cold, sterile, logical world of my cockpit, it was the only explanation that fit the data. The next hour was the longest, most antagonizing hour of my life. My eyes burned, my neck ached, I couldn't look away. The captain handled all the communications, his voice tight with the tension that I'm sure the controllers on the ground could hear. He kept glancing at me, then at my screen. His face, a pale, sweaty mask in the dim cockpit light. "It's still there?" he'd ask every few minutes. "It's still there," I'd reply, my voice a dry rasp, my eyes watering from the strain. I tried to be clever. I tried to use my peripheral vision to look at the other instruments, but the moment my focus shifted even slightly from the center of the screen, I could feel it. A subtle, almost imperceptible lurch in my stomach. A strange, dizzying sensation of movement, of space being compressed. The moment my focus snapped back to the diamond, the feeling would stop. But I couldn't keep it up forever. My eyes were on fire. They were so dry and strained that the screen in front of me was starting to blur. The glowing green diamond swimming in a haze of my own tears. "I can't do this, Cap," I finally gasped. My vision wavering. I have to rub my eyes. "Don't you dare, kid," he hissed, his voice a low, desperate command. "Don't you dare look away." But it was too late. My body betrayed me. I rubbed them, and it was a long, slow, antagonizing, tired rubbing as I am trying to regain my focus. My eyelids feeling like they were made of lead. When I opened my eyes, the screen was clean. The green diamond was gone. A wave of profound, shuddering relief washed over me. It was over. It had vanished. I had won the world's most terrifying staring contest. I let out a choked, hysterical laugh. "It's gone," I said to the captain, my voice cracking. "It's gone." The captain didn't reply. He was staring straight ahead, through the cockpit window, his face a mask of pure, abject terror. I had never seen on any human being, let alone this grizzled, unflappable veteran. "First officer," he whispered, his voice a strangled, terrified thing. "What is that above us?" I followed his gaze up through the top window of the cockpit, and I saw it. We were flying under an ocean, a living, breathing, impossible ocean, where the sky should have been. And floating in that ocean, its colossal, bulbous body, blotting out the stars, was a creature of impossible scale. It was a squid the size of a mountain, its skin a shifting, iridescent tapestry of colors I had never before seen. Its tentacles, each one as thick as a skyscraper, drifted lazily in the void, tipped with what looked like hooks of polished obsidian. At the center of its great, fleshy head was a single, vast, intelligent eye, a golden reptilian orb the size of a football stadium, and it was looking down on us. We were tiny, insignificant minnow swimming under the belly of the Leviathan. My mind simply broke. I stared, my mouth agape, unable to process the sheer cosmic Lovecraftian horror of what I was seeing, and then I rubbed my eyes, not believing what I was seeing. Just a normal reflex this time. When I opened my eyes, it was gone from above us. It was now in front of us. It was just there, filling the entire windshield, a solid wall of shifting, alien color, and a single, vast golden eye that filled my entire universe. The captain screamed, a raw, terrified animal sound. I just sat there frozen, waiting for the impact that would annihilate us. I rubbed my eyes again, and it was gone. The sky in front of us was empty. The stars were back. I looked at my navigation display. It was clean. The captain was hyperventilating, his hands shaking so violently he couldn't hold his pen. Did we just... He couldn't finish the sentence. "Yeah," I whispered. "I think we did." The rest of the flight was a silent, terrified ordeal. We landed the plane on autopilot, our hands too shaky to trust with the controls. We didn't speak a single word to each other. When we got to the gate, we just unbuckled, grabbed our bags, and walked out of the cockpit, leaving the plane to the next crew. I'm in my hotel room now. It's been hours, but I can't stop shaking. The captain is in the next room. I can hear him, through the wall, talking on the phone to his wife, his voice a broken, trembling thing. I don't know what we saw. I don't know what the rules are, but I know this. There are things in the sky, in the deep, dark, empty spaces, and they have their own rules. And last night, I played a game with one of them. a game of hide and seek at 500 knots at 37,000 feet. And I am so afraid that it's not done playing with me. I am so afraid to see it again. The end. That was a pretty good story. I really liked it a lot. I really like Gamal Frank. He makes good stories. I like how in a lot of the literature that is inspired by Lovecraft stories, this one very obviously is inspired by Cthulhu in a way. I think there is something cool about a cosmic horror that's incomprehensible. It's one thing to imagine a Slender Man or the clown from It, or a villain that you can put a face behind, but it's another thing to imagine a cosmic horror that is faceless, that is formless almost, that is in a way so incomprehensible that just looking at it kind of breaks your brain, like with these characters. I think it goes to show you that truly there are so many things out there that we don't understand. I like to think that there are so many great forces out there, similar to this, good ones and bad ones, of course, that truly we are very fortunate to know nothing about. I really like that idea. I like the idea that there are things out there that we are being protected from just by not even seeing, not even thinking about, not even hearing, or simply understanding. I like that cosmic horror. With that being said, is there anything that we could have done differently in this story? Have you had any thoughts so far? If so, please let me know down in the comments below. I love reading the comments, and I will try to respond to all of them. As for my thoughts, I think trying to either blink really quickly or maybe just testing it out, I think that would not be a bad idea. I think going so long until you have to blink for more than a second so that it can move a great distance, as opposed to blinking for a fraction of a second. Maybe it would move the same amount of space, but there's not really a great way to know. Now what we know is that he looked away for 10 seconds and then it moved really close to the plane. Then he rubbed his eyes and it was above him. Then he rubbed his eyes again and it was in front of him. Then he rubbed his eyes again and it was gone. So whatever it was, it had some form of a knowledge of what he was thinking, or at least the intention behind his actions, or maybe even just his actions. But whatever it was, it could either see him very, very clearly, or it had a grasp on him somehow. Now, my first initial thought was that he was kind of being influenced by this creature, but when the co-pilot, the veteran pilot, saw it too, that made me think it definitely was not just in his head. Or maybe it was just in both of their heads. It's hard to say. But the thing with cosmic horrors is truly the only thing you can do is try to get outside of their grasp. Try to get away from any of their followers that they might have, and try not to be someone that they've picked for something, whether that be some kind of ritual or something else. With all that being said, I think this story is survivable, but I think the next steps are what's important. That being to try not to let it eat away at you. Try not to let it consume you. Try not to ask too many questions afterwards, so that if it truly was just some form of a shared hallucination or daydream from a gas leak or something like that, that it just consumes you and it becomes all that you are. I think in the world that we live in, it's easy to see things like this and have it consume you. I think a great example of that is from season 1 of True Detective, where the main character, Rust, one of the main characters, comes across a different Lovecraft character, that being the King in Yellow, and it just kind of consumes him to the point where he can't do anything else but obtain answers. And that's all he is in his core. It's completely stripped him away of basically everything else he is. because nothing else to him matters. On the one hand, it's good to ask questions, but on the other hand, you have to live your life. You have to live your life. Not live a life as a unintentioned follower. So with that is the lesson that I would like to leave with you all today. Make sure that in your quest for knowledge or power or whatever else, you aren't questing for someone else, but you're doing it for you. In today's world, there are a lot of people who are hitting burnout, and I think that's a sign that you're probably a good person who initially did the thing for you, but then it became a very hard thing to do, and so you started doing it for someone else, and you just can't find the will to do it for them anymore. That's what I think burnout comes to. Now, that's not every case of it for sure, but in the times when I've been burnt out of things in my life, it's because I was so headstrong about it in the beginning, and then it came time for me to keep going, and I couldn't do it for myself, so I had to do it for someone else, and once that finished up, I couldn't bring myself to do the thing anymore. With that being said, please make sure that you do everything in your life 100%. Don't just give it half of you. Do it with your all. And make sure you're doing it for you. Today's story was posted to the r/no sleep subreddit by WayBlue, and it's entitled, "My New Coworker Didn't Blink Once All Night." And it starts like this. I'll be entirely honest with you. I don't really know what to do right now. I just decided to write this on here. My hands are literally still shaking as I type this. I have no idea what happened to me today. For context, my name's Jack, and I work at a bottle shop. It's actually not terrible work, for the most part. It's owned and operated independently as a small business, so I get pretty taken care of on a payday. It's one of those bottle stores that operates as a drive-thru. Either a customer comes up to the corner with their alcohol and I scan it through for them, or they pull up in the drive-thru and I serve them with whatever they need. Anyways, there's this event in town at the moment. It's an annual thing, and the store has pretty much blown up. I can't really keep up with everything happening, so my boss said he was planning on hiring a new guy for me to work with on Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. Hence today's horrifying events. Earlier today, at 4 p.m., I clocked in for a 3-hour shift. It was really business as usual, but being a Friday, I was definitely preparing to get slammed. As I clocked in on the computer in the back office, I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. I grabbed it and saw Sam Boss was phoning me. I clicked accept and put the phone to my ear. "Good afternoon," I offered warmly. "Hey mate, it's Sam. You clocking in now?" "Yep, just got to work." "Easy. Listen, you're gonna love me for this. We're trialing a new employee tonight. He should be getting there any second. Name's Damien. You all good to show him the ropes?" "Yeah, Sam. I was literally just mentally preparing myself to get overrun with customers. Yeah, I'll show him how everything's done." "No problems. Look, I'm on my way to that meeting I was telling you about, and I'm just about to hit a black spot, so I'll let you go. Give me a buzz after you clock out, and you let me know how he went. Keep in mind, I'm in and out of meetings until just after 7, okay?" "No worries, Sam. Thanks again. See ya." And that was that. Gosh dang, I wish I could go back, turn around, and never have stepped foot into the store that night. But I did. I walked out of the office and into the main part of the store, and saw a short, slightly chubby man standing behind the counter looking at me. "There he is. Damien?" I exclaimed as I went up and shook his hand. "That's right. What's your name?" He responded excitedly. "I'm Jack. It's nice to meet you, mate. Let me show you around." The first thing I noticed about Damien was his smile. All the teeth in his mouth seemed visible, and his smile literally never seemed to waver. I don't actually remember ever seeing him with a straight face. As I showed him around, I tried to get to know him a little bit. "Whereabouts are you from, Damien?" I asked. Not from around here, was all he responded with. Yeah, cool. How'd you find out about this job? I just saw the opportunity, he said, his smile quivering. I just nodded at that. I didn't really seem to get straight answers to the questions I was asking. Instead, he would respond exclusively in a manner which operated to provide as little information as possible. I finished showing him where everything was, and we returned to the counter. To be honest, the shift started pretty slow, but Damien and I actually struck a bit of a good system. We would trade customers so as to stagger the workload between the two of us. Whenever one of us wasn't with a customer, the other would be stocking the shelves. Not long after this system was engaged, I realized how clueless he was with interacting with these customers. I honestly just assumed that maybe he didn't have a customer service background or something. But this guy was at least in his 40s. I wasn't sure how anyone could get to that age and be as poor in customer relations as this gentleman. For example, this one guy came in, and Damien didn't even initiate the interaction. He stood there, smiling at him, waiting for the customer to tell him what he wanted without any provocation. That struck me as really odd. About half an hour went by, and then service really started to pick up. People were coming home from work about at that time, so I underwent what I usually did on weekends. A battering, we continued to trade customers, and although his social skills weren't great, the system was working. I found that I was having to work a lot less hard than I usually did. Then, something strange happened. I waved goodbye to a usual customer, and this older lady Damien had just served pulled over to the side of the drive-thru. I saw her arm stick out of her window, followed by her head. She looked right at me and waved me over. A little bit thrown, I walked over to her, preparing to get yelled at for one reason or another. Hi, mate, she said in a real gravelly voice. Look, not to be a jerk or anything, but you might want to review the performance of your colleague over there. She pointed vaguely in the direction he was standing. He was facing away from us, doing absolutely nothing. But even from the back of his head and the way his cheeks looked, I could tell he was smiling. He didn't say a word to me. He just stared at me for ages, then silently went on and got my things after I blurted out what I wanted. He also didn't stop smiling once. Yeah, this is his first shift. I think he's just nerve. But I didn't get to finish what I was saying. As we were both looking in his direction, and as I was speaking, a tooth fell out of his mouth. A single tooth. It fell in front of him and bounced off that box that was at his feet, landing just beside him. Me and the woman were stunned. We just watched for a few more seconds. Love, I don't know what the heck is happening here, but be careful. I've got to run, but seriously, be careful. She peeled out of the drive-thru, leaving me shocked and alone. I probably watched him for at least 2 or 3 more minutes, which doesn't sound like a long time, but trust me when I say it is. In a silent drive-thru, watching a smiling man stare aimlessly into the back of a fridge, it was just bizarre. I finally pulled up the courage to continue about my work. After that customer, we hit a huge quiet patch. I went to the fridges on the opposite side of the store and began to load them. After a little bit, I heard him moving over to the other side of the shop. I looked over and saw he'd shuffled over to behind the counter now. Oh, for crap's sake, I thought. Now he's facing right in my direction. I continued to load the fridge, and Damien did not stop staring at me for even 1 second. He didn't break eye contact. I could see in my peripheral vision that his outline remained facing towards me, smiling and observing. For 1 second, I mustered up the guts to glance in his direction and mistake. For 1 split second, I mustered up the guts to glance in his direction and saw a missing front tooth. My stomach genuinely sank. It was the worst feeling. Just as I returned to my work, I heard the gentle rumbling of an engine as a car pulled up in the drive-thru. I heard absolutely no movement from behind me in Damien's direction, meaning it was clearly up to me to greet and serve the customer. Shakily, I went to the driver's side window and said my usual greetings. As the customer was telling me what he wanted, I heard a clink and tapping sound coming from behind me. I immediately knew what it was, but I still had to turn around to check. Unsurprisingly, he continued to smile, but now there were 2 gaps in his teeth. He'd lost another tooth. "Oi!" the guy in the car shouted. "Mate, I was talking to you." "Sorry, mate," I responded, still looking at Damien. He just stared at me and smiled. He didn't blink. He didn't even seem to be breathing. The customer repeated what he wanted, and then it dawned on me that in order for me to scan it through, I was going to have to go up to the counter and stand right next to that creep. A pang of nerves hit my gut, but I had to do what I had to do. I grabbed his drinks from the fridge and made my way around the back of the counter. Of course, the scan tool decided to crap itself out right as I was using it, so I had to stuff around for even longer than I planned on doing. He was right next to me, but I didn't look at him once. I was too scared. I walked around and gave the customer his stuff, and he sped away without so much as a thank you. Finally, the clock on the wall ticked over to 6:55 p.m., and it was time to close. As I turned around to grab the keys from the counter, I yelled. He had been standing right behind me. "Oh, for heck's sake, Damien," I yelled. I was scared. I actually don't know why I yelled that. He didn't change. He continued to smile. I just need to lock up and get out of here, I thought to myself. I walked around him with a newfound sense of bravery, grabbed the keys, and went over to the roller doors. I went around locking everything, not even caring to check on the whereabouts of my colleague. As I crouched down to lock the last roller door into place, I noticed I had goosebumps. I wasn't even sure why. Then my blood ran cold as I looked in the reflection of the fridge in front of me. That jerk was right behind me. My fight or flight reaction kicked in. I turned around, punched him in his liver, and sprinted as fast as I physically could to the nearest lockable door, the bathroom. As I rounded the corner to the back, I heard heavy footsteps behind me, way too heavy to proportionally match Damien's stature, way too fast to be human. I threw the men's bathroom door open and slammed it behind me, locking it on instinct. No sooner had I locked the door than a deafening bang sounded upon it. He was right outside. Words cannot describe the fear I was in. I'm not usually easily scared or anything, and I don't think that my recounting of these events does justice to the horror that would be felt under these circumstances. There was silence for a second, and then an extensive series of bangs rang out on the door. It was like there was 10 men out there all banging on the door at once. It was such a strong sound. Slowly, it picked up in pace. Soon the banging was occurring at a seemingly impossible speed. There was not a single chance that whatever was out there was human. No human in the world could ever hit the door as hard and as fast as he was. Then finally, it stopped. Silence. I saw the door handles tremble slowly. I remember thinking to myself, is he trying to open the door? The trembling stopped, and so too did the commotion of everything. I probably called Sam like 7 or 8 times, but he didn't pick up at all. I stayed there in that bathroom for hours. I was way too scared to do anything. In retrospect, I have no idea why I didn't just call the cops. My adrenaline was so spiked that the only option in my mind was to call Sam for some reason. Finally, after an eternity, my phone buzzed. It was Sam. I answered straight away. Before I could say anything, his voice rang loudly into my ear. "Jack, I know you've probably been frustrated, but that's no way to respond to a situation outside of my control. I've been in and out of meetings all evening, you know that. Geez, were you so busy you couldn't handle the drive-thru on your own?" "Sam, you have no idea what happened. He was crazy. I think I need to call the cops." Just as I was about to launch into informing him of the night's events, his words turned over in my mind. "Wait, Sam, what are you talking about? What do you mean I couldn't handle the work on my own?" "Jack, I've already apologized that the trainee didn't show up. He said he was sick and wouldn't be able to come in. Still no reason to give me an earful for it. My stomach dropped. The new guy never showed up. What? No, he didn't show up. He was sick. He said he'd come in next weekend to trial with you. Sorry. You've got to do another weekend on your own, mate. His words sat like a ton of bricks in the air. I hung up on him. I swung open the door and looked at the door handle. It had bite marks on it, of a very specific formation. The bite indentations on the wood had one upper tooth missing and one lower tooth missing. I checked everywhere in the store. There was no sign of a struggle. Whatever it was just vanished. I don't even know where it went. Every time I think about what happened tonight, the realization just sets in on me again. The real trainee never showed up. I have no idea who or what I worked with tonight. The end. That was a good story. I really liked it a lot. I think if there was anything different that could have been done, probably shooting the boss a text a little bit earlier in the day saying, hey, this guy is pretty suspicious and he's giving everybody the creeps. I think the owner of the establishment would definitely, care about the reputation being upheld, and so I don't think he'd be mad about getting a text saying, hey, this guy is a creep and he's freaking people out. Plus, if you're the trainee guy or the trainer guy, I don't think it's out of your realm of reason to say, hey, quit that. He might be creepy, but especially in the daylight hours when there's a lot of people around, he's not just going to kill you, hopefully. Now, and I don't know exactly the layout of this building, but I would imagine that there'd be a back door somewhere. Hopefully he could have ran out of that instead of into the bathroom. Because bathrooms, usually do not have a window. And in the event that it doesn't have a window and he breaks through that door, you're just dead. But if it does have a window, I guess you could have got out that way, but in the story it doesn't say, so I'm going to assume it didn't. Now, with all of that, I think while this story has a creepy critter, I think it's definitely beatable. I think that the person in the story was pretty smart, but had they made a few better decisions, they might have been even better off. And with that, what do you think we can learn from this story? What is a lesson from today's story? If you've been thinking throughout the story, hopefully you have been if you've been watching a lot of these videos, please take a moment to comment down below what you've been thinking. With that being said, for me, I would say that the lesson for today's story is don't give too much thought to societal norms. With that being said, tell people what you think. If somebody's being creepy, I don't think that you have to be completely disrespectful in telling them so. But I do think sometimes maybe just smiling and waving and keeping on, pretending like nothing's wrong, isn't the way to do it. I think there's definitely a balance, and I think the story goes to highlight that. I think that in our lives, we'll come up against a lot of situations, and especially a lot of situations where we don't just have to be an NPC of sorts. We can be a part of it. We can be a part of helping people to understand that there are a better way to do things while not being a jerk. There is a happy medium to that, of being productive, of being helpful, of letting people know, hey, you're really creeping people out. But telling them so in such a loving way that you can both be better for it. Today's story is entitled, If Your Phone Loses Service and Your GPS Reroutes You, Turn It Off. And it was uploaded to the r/NoSleep subreddit by Let's Split Up. And it starts like this. Don't get me wrong, I love using GPS. Saves me time when there's traffic or unexpected construction, but it can be dangerous if it takes you to the wrong place at the wrong time. A shortcut through a bad part of the city at night, or a shortcut along a gravel road where your tire gets punctured and suddenly you're there for hours waiting for a tow, or worse. Mistake. There are many places we aren't meant to go. Last night, my fiancé, Rav, and I were on a road trip to visit our family. Our trip took us through northern Appalachia, and our phone service kept cutting in and out. When we hit construction, our pace slowed to a crawl. The GPS offered a faster route, so we took it, but soon we were winding through wooded hills and lost all service. My map was still active, sort of, but no longer giving directions. It just showed the route we were on as a colored line. The sun was lowering in the sky, and I couldn't zoom out to see where we were. We also hadn't seen signs for any gas stations where I could ask for directions. "This," grumbled Rav, "this is why you shouldn't rely on GPS, Ricardo." He only ever called me Ricardo when he was upset, a habit he borrowed from my mom. I was always Rick until I was in trouble. He also was never willing to be the one to drive, and I said, "Okay, well, if you want to fill my car with maps from Minnesota to Long Island, I guess we could kill some trees and go the old-fashioned route. We can just map out the route in advance and print the sections we need." "Oh, so like MapQuest? Back to the technological superiority of the 90s? I snarked. While we bickered, suddenly the phone screen went out. Then flickered back on. The GPS was working again. Hallelujah! I thanked the universe as it began recalculating our route, and my spirits lightened, even as the sky was getting darker. Rav never let things go, though, and was still grumbling about how I shouldn't rely on my phone, about how I should look with my own eyes and learn the roads. If you depend on GPS, you should stop learning to keep track of directions. He stopped noticing things like that. He suddenly sat up. Haven't we already passed these signs? I hadn't been paying enough attention to notice, and only barely caught a glimpse of a sign for falling rocks, followed up with another sign for bears. "I swear we drove by here half an hour ago," mumbled Rav. "Maybe we did," I said. "We were lost before. Now, it's got the route, which is the way. But it's taking us further and further into the hills and away from the highway." I zoomed out and looked at the larger map. Maybe this is a shortcut to get further along ahead of the traffic. Rav fell quiet, and we put on some music. Beneath the stereo, something didn't feel quite right. It was hard for me to pinpoint on the surface. Everything was fine, and I figured maybe my uneasy feeling was because this was an unfamiliar route, and we were both crabby and tired. We'd been in the car all day. I sped up as the sun vanished behind the hills and the sky turned fiery red. I'd fallen into the zone like I always tend to do while driving long distances, when the roads are long, empty stretches, and I don't need to concentrate like in city traffic. I sort of just let instinct take over and my mind wanders. I just drove, just lazily watching my GPS and the line on the GPS marking the road. The road ran on endlessly ahead. I saw on the map where it curved up ahead. The road began to turn. "Hey, Rick, slow down." At Rav's shout, I slammed the brakes, swerving because the curve came on faster than I expected. I looked at the GPS, and it was zoomed in, and when I zoomed out, it showed how tight the curve was. There'd been some lag. Rav was clinging to the handle above the door. He glared my way, and I muttered an apology and drove more carefully. I am, usually, a pretty reliable driver. The GPS, being laggy, had caught me off guard. Rav glowered and said, "That thing is going to get us killed." More long stretches of silence, and the sky deepening as the first stars became visible. There was still a fair bit of light, but even so I turned on my headlights, and I was still following the long line of the GPS when suddenly, Rav was screaming, "Stop! Stop!" I hadn't seen anything in the road, but his panic sent my foot shooting for the brake, and we skidded, and I yanked the wheel to bring us into the side of the hill. He was gasping, and I looked ahead to where the road went over a bridge. It took me a moment to see clearly what Rav had seen. A few feet out, the bridge was broken, nothing but the drop below. Rav and I got out and walked over to the bridge and stepped across remnants of a barricade. It must have been set up to warn vehicles about the bridge being out. Now, it was in pieces, flattened and broken. Driving at speed, you'd never see these shattered pieces in time. Rav's eagle eyes had saved our lives. We stepped past the broken barricade. "Careful," muttered Rav, as I moved to the edge of the broken bridge and looked down. Cars lay piled below, and what looked like a body spilled out of one of them at the bottom of the ravine. That's why the barricade was broken. Not just one, but multiple vehicles had smashed through it. Chilled, I backed away from the drop. The pair of us picked our way back over the shattered barricade and along the road. We were almost at our vehicle when headlights blinded us. A truck barreled towards us. I grabbed Rav and flung him with me into the hillside as a scream of a horn shot past us, the truck driver laying it on. And then the wheels clacked over the broken barricade, and the horn faded out into nothingness as the truck went over. There was a horrible metallic crunching as it crashed and rolled far below. My head was bleeding from hitting a rock as we slammed into the hill, but luckily, neither of us were seriously injured. We hurried back into the car, strapping ourselves in and quickly pulling a 3-point turn and driving away, back the way we had come. Ignoring the GPS now, ignoring its directions to turn around, recalculating route. Finally, we caught a glimpse of a sign for gas and followed until we reached the station, where we called police to report the broken bridge. While I was on the call using the gas station phone, my cell phone rebooted. Suddenly, it had signal again, and now, the map was showing me a totally different route, a totally normal route, taking us back to the highway. Police never found the broken bridge, and my GPS never tried to take me that way again. But these days, just in case, I always plan my route in advance. The end. I liked that story. I think the lesson, you don't have to dig very far for it. First, I'd like to talk about what we could do differently in this story, in this situation. I think that primarily the difference that could be made here is try and not zone out so much while driving. I know that it's super easy, especially on those big long stretches when truly it feels like you're going straight in a line. But trying to be kind of coherent while driving is super important. Trying to not go on autopilot. Another thing, and I guess this sort of goes towards the lesson from this story. One, don't trust things so blatantly. I think anyone who ever has used GPS and whoever has been routed into a really weird or even dangerous or out in the middle of nowhere type of spot understands that sometimes GPS is just weird. It does not understand the earth. It does not understand sometimes there's a cliff. It does not understand a lot of things like this especially. So even if there wasn't anything malicious, I could totally believe that this was just a freak accident on the part of a GPS. But I think a deeper meaning is a lot of times in our lives, there are things or people or places even that claim on the surface that they want to help us. And if we don't do any digging on that, if we just trust, oftentimes we might leave ourselves vulnerable to driving off into a cliff, if you were to take the story as a good example. I think that with that, it's important to understand that there are things out there who pretend to be nice, who pretend to be good, or who on the surface level seem fine. But then, if you're willing to just not go into autopilot and dig just a little bit deeper, you realize this thing doesn't really have my best intentions in mind. This thing isn't really all good as it has been chopped up to be. And I think the second lesson that we can take from this story is equally as important. And that is, if we're so used to what we're doing, if all we do is get up, go to school or work, then maybe we come home and eat dinner, maybe we talk, hang out, play some games, whatever else for a few hours, and then go to bed. As this routine becomes easier and easier, it's easier, just as in the story, to kind of dissociate from this reality, to dissociate from your life. Then you blink, and then you blink a few more times, and 10 years have passed. 30 years have passed. 50 years have passed. I myself have not experienced this for too long. But I know just how easy it is, looking back, noticing how quickly things seem to have gone. I understand that in this life we do not have unlimited time, and we need to spend time on things that are good, on things that we want to spend them on. If you can imagine that every hour of your life is meaningful, I feel like you'll do a lot more with the time that you have. If you can understand that if I spend an hour a day, let's say scrolling on my phone, and then if I were to live 100 years, that's just about 4 and some change, 4 years and some change that I spent scrolling. If you were to live to about 100 years, and there's 24 hours in a day, then if you take 1 hour doing anything, and you multiply it by 4, and the decimal, of course, but just 4, that's how many years you'd be doing that thing. So if it was 2 hours scrolling a day, if it was 5 hours playing video games a day, whatever else. That's not to say that these things are bad or that you shouldn't do them at all. But please just understand, little time adds up to a lot of time over your lifetime. Try saying that 3 times fast. Please, if there's any big one lesson I can take from this story that I would love to implore you to think about and to ponder about, it is this. Please be intentional with your life. Please be intentional with who you are and who you choose to associate with. Please be intentional with where you're headed. Because if you're not, you'll finish the race regardless of if you want to or not. Just remember that. And with that, it seems like you've made it to the end of the video. Only this time, you're a little different. You've been changed by 1 or 2 of these stories. Hopefully, to not make the same mistakes that these characters made. If you enjoyed today's stories, and you'd like to hear more, make sure to subscribe, as it is free and you can change your mind later. Because I'll be making a new video every day, so that you can always learn from these stories as well. I appreciate you all, and the love and support that you've given me in making these videos, and I will try to make each of my videos better than the last. And I love your support, and maybe comments down below of telling me what you'd like to see. With that, I'm Cece. I love you all. Goodbye.